Hello and welcome to the program Network Africa. I'm Layo Olamide. We begin here in Nigeria. In the wake of rising insecurity in the country, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has declared a nationwide security emergency. The worsening security situation has compelled the federal government to authorize additional recruitment into the armed forces and the police. Channels Television State House correspondent Emperor Simon tells us more.
In the last 1 week, Nigeria has witnessed a series of security threats. From Kebbi State, where 25 schoolgirls were abducted from Government Girls Comprehensive Secondary School in Marga, to the killing and abduction of worshippers from Christ Apostolic Church, Eruku in Ekiti local government area of Kwara State, and the abduction of over 300 school children from a Catholic school in Niger State, among other attacks, the country has seen a surge in security challenges. Although some of the abductees have been rescued following days of security operations closely monitored by President Bola Tinubu, the president has gone further to find a more lasting solution as it declares a national security emergency on Wednesday. The president directs the police to recruit an additional 20,000 officers to bring the total to 50,000, with authorization for the force to use various National Youth Service Corps camps as training depots. He also says the police officers being withdrawn from very important persons in the country should undergo crash training to debrief them and deliver more efficient police services when deployed to security-challenged areas of the country. President Tinubu also directs the Department of State Services to immediately deploy all the forest guards already trained to flush out the terrorists and bandits lurking in forests across the country. It says the agency also has his directive to recruit more men to man the forests. His message reads in part, quote, "My fellow Nigerians, this is a national emergency, and we're responding by deploying more boots on the ground, especially in security-challenged areas. The times require all hands on deck. As Nigerians, we should all get involved in securing our nation." End of quote. President Tinubu commends the courage and sacrifice of the leadership and rank and file of the armed forces, charging them to remain resolute, restore peace across all theaters of operation, and to uphold the highest standards of discipline and integrity. According to him, quote, "There must be no compromise, no collusion, and no negligence. The Nigerian people are counting on you, and this administration will provide the support you need to succeed." End of quote. The president further called on the National Assembly to begin reviewing the laws to allow states that require state police to establish them. President Tinubu sympathized with families who lost their loved ones in recent attacks across the country and paid tribute to soldiers who made the ultimate sacrifice. From the presidential villa, Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
Updates now from Guinea-Bissau, which is still reeling from the shock of a military takeover on Wednesday. An army general has been sworn in as the country's new junta leader. General Horta Ntam becomes the transitional head of state for a period of 1 year. In a statement, he justified the seizure of power and said the army had taken charge in the face of threats to Guinea-Bissau's democratic stability. The military had already suspended the electoral process and blocked the release of results of the Sunday's presidential election, which were expected today, Thursday. Well, some civil society groups in the country are accusing outgoing President Umaru Embalo of masterminding a simulated coup against himself with the help of the military, saying it was a ruse to block the election results from coming out in case he loses. Well, in the meantime, normal life appears to have returned to the streets of Bissau after the army declared assumption of power and the arrest of President Embalo.
Guinea-Bissau is no stranger to political upheaval. Following Sunday's presidential election in the country, both incumbent President Umaru Sissoco Embalo and his main challenger, Fernando Diaz, claimed victory, setting the country on edge. The Electoral Commission was due to release official results on Thursday, but the uncertainty deepened on Wednesday as senior military officers appeared on state television announcing they had taken full control of the West African nation. They declared the president removed from office and all state institutions suspended until further notice. The president is said to have been arrested inside the presidential palace. President Embalo said no force was used directly against him during what he describes as a coup d'etat led by the country's army chief of staff. The African Union, the ECOWAS Election Observer Mission, and several West African leaders have condemned the military takeover, expressing deep concern over the president's arrest and the detention of some of his associates.
About the situation in Guinea-Bissau, and I can tell you that obviously the Secretary General is following the situation with deep concern. He appeals to all national stakeholders in Guinea-Bissau to exercise restraint and respect the rule of law. The Secretary General will continue to closely follow the situation in the country as it unfolds.
Since independence in 1974, the country has experienced 4 successful coups and many several attempts.
Meanwhile, following the coup in Guinea-Bissau, the Nigerian government says it is making efforts to ensure the return of the country's former president, Goodluck Jonathan, who's said to be trapped in that country. The former president is among African leaders on the joint mission of the AU and ECOWAS, who were in Guinea-Bissau to monitor the presidential election that was held over the weekend. Well, earlier, the House of Representatives has asked the federal government to deploy all diplomatic channels to secure the safe return of former President Goodluck Jonathan from Guinea-Bissau. Well, joining us now for more discussions on this is Achike, the African Affairs Analyst and the National Secretary of the Nigeria Union of Journalists. Thank you so much for speaking to us on Network Africa.
Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure, as usual, to be on this program with you. I'm speaking from Abuja.
All right, good to have you. Well, Guinea-Bissau just had their elections on Sunday, and we were expecting a result today, but on Wednesday, we heard of the military takeover. Well, the main presidential candidates, that was the president and the opposition, claimed victory to that election. Do you think perhaps this created an atmosphere for the coup?
No, I do not think so. I think that the coup is a continuation and completion of a coup attempt that had taken place, that was alleged to have taken place a few days ago, a few days before the election. In fact, the military top brass had come out to tell the nation that there was an attempted coup just before the election. And then, of course, all the people had been arrested. We had some hierarchy, some top people within the military that were responsible for that alleged coup. And so this would appear that, having not succeeded with that particular one, that there was perhaps a plan B. And this plan B is what has actually taken place this time around successfully. Yeah, it was something in the offing. It was already planned. So this is not it's not a surprise coup. It was already on ground because, of course, you know, it takes time to plan a coup. There are issues of logistics, deployment of men and materials and resources needed for the execution of the coup itself. So the fact that it was just a few hours, a few days before the announcement of an election result, and then the coup took place, that tells you that already there was a plan beforehand.
Yes, just before I go to my next question, we've just gotten an update from the federal government of Nigeria, who has confirmed that the former president, Goodluck Jonathan, is currently on his way back to the country. You know, we took the story earlier about him being trapped in Guinea-Bissau as a result of that military coup. Mr. Chike, let me get your thoughts on that. Former President Goodluck Jonathan was in the country with, other West African ECOWAS AU observer missions for that election. But now this is what the situation has unfolded.
Yeah, well, it's what has been happening for quite some time when it comes to elections. All manners of groups, international groups, very credible organizations get involved in the process because it's important to also have external bodies also monitor and they give their thoughts on the elections in those countries. So it's unfortunate that the former president was caught in the coup, but of course that there is no way the coup plotters will not do everything in their power, within their power, to ensure the safety of these important dignitaries. They don't want to incur the wrath of other countries in the process. Of course, you know that it's not an action that will go down well with a lot of people, groups, organizations, even within the African continent. So they have to make sure that everything is done to ensure that these people, who in most cases are usually people who have held government positions, the various positions in their various governments, that they are kept safe in order to reduce the pressure on them. That is talking about the coup plotter. So we are happy that the former president is safe, and I'm sure that his other colleagues from other West African countries, other African countries, are also safe in the process too.
Well, let's talk about the region now, West Africa. I mean, the spate of coups in this region, do you think it calls to question, the sustainability of democracy? Like, what really would it take to end the menace in the region? We have several countries who are still under military leadership, and now Guinea-Bissau joins the list.
It's one more unfortunate reversal to the democratization process in Africa and in West Africa, most especially. Because it would appear that West Africa is becoming the epicenter of coups and undemocratic behaviors, by the military in their respective countries. And this is very sad and unfortunate and a tragedy. Obviously, it's a reflection of the failures of the democratization process. But we must also realize that it takes time. Democracy takes time. Entrenching democracy is something that is not done in a decade or 2 decades. It takes time, but with everybody working towards it, the general populace, or most especially those to whom leadership positions have been entrusted with, and that is the political class. So what you have really, at the end of the day, because the question you want to ask is, what happens? Yeah, obviously we are taking many, many steps backwards. But why is it happening in some of these countries? You cannot be far. And I think the very last question or comment you made is what do we do to stem this tide of undemocratic behavior by military institutions across the continent, especially in the West African sub-region? I think one simple answer, good governance. Of course, good governance is not it's easy to say good governance, but to actually achieve it is a completely different, thing. But that is the way, because you see, when these military adventurers come to power, there is always an excuse, and the excuse is always excuse of misgovernance, excuses of corruption, excuses of perhaps, the economy, the state of, the progress or lack of progress within the economy, unemployment and all that. These are the things that the putschists, jump on and use it as a bait to try to get the support of the people. And so you ask yourself, really, if most of the countries where we have had these issues of military adventurism, you always find some of these things that I've just talked about: unemployment, economic deprivation, poverty, deepening poverty, and so many other things. Of course, insecurity has become, a major problem within the West African sub-region, with some of these jihadist, movements and the terrorists riding, holding sway in many of these countries and causing all manners of damage. So there is this general disillusionment with the activities of the political class, their inability their inability to ensure that people feel the dividends of democracy And it is what the military, does in these respective countries to ride on the wave of this public disillusionment, to now provide an excuse to take over. And so the solution is that of good governance. And then, of course, we have also seen this situation of seat-titism, where political leaders actually subvert the constitution of their countries, give themselves some, extra terms of power. In fact, in some cases, even the issue of term limitation is completely abrogated. And then they begin to ride roughshod over the people. These are the things that military adventurists look at, and then they use it as a basis to gain political power. It's sad, and for as long as our politicians do not up the ante, do not begin to realize that they have a fundamental duty to provide for the welfare and the security of their people, so they always have people behind the scenes plotting to take over in an undemocratic manner and fashion.
All right, then. Mr. Chike Chude, African Affairs Analyst and National Secretary of the Nigerian Union of Journalists, thank you for speaking to us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Lyle.
Just to reiterate earlier information that the federal government of Nigeria has confirmed that the former president of the country, Goodluck Jonathan, is currently on his way back from Guinea-Bissau after being trapped in the country following the military takeover on Wednesday. The former president is among African leaders on the joint mission of the AU and ECOWAS who were in Guinea-Bissau to monitor the presidential election that held on Sunday. Well, joining us now is our Sahel correspondent, Mo Sani Aliyu, for an update on what's happening in Guinea-Bissau. Mo joins us from Kaduna here in Nigeria. Hello, Mo. Thank you for standing by. What are your sources on the ground in Guinea-Bissau saying about, the atmosphere today? I mean, it's the day after the shocking announcement of a military takeover.
Well, thank you for having me, Layo. Exactly this morning, when I started reaching out to my sources in Guinea-Bissau, most of them told me that the country is, most people in the country are shocked. There's a lot of confusion and fear amongst the population, especially in the capital city, especially near the Electoral Commission and the Presidential Palace, where the military has taken over the entire neighborhood. And a lot of gunshots have been heard overnight before this morning. According to some other sources I spoke to this afternoon, by this afternoon, things have started getting back to normal in certain parts of the city. Some shops are open. Vehicles have started moving, that is commercial vehicles have started moving around, moving passengers around the city. But most people have elected to stay at home to study the situation because a lot of things are still fluid. Nobody knows exactly what may turn out to be, whether a successful coup or there could be a counter coup or any other thing that they are afraid of happening. So right now, fear and a lot of confusion is what is happening in the city. I spoke to some journalists from international media who happen to be amongst those who were monitoring the elections, and they told me that they had been confined to their hotel rooms. They were not allowed to move. They couldn't get into any parts of the city or to interview people or to know exactly what is happening. So there's virtually nothing much that has been happening, except for the fact that the internet is still on. You can reach people, and those I spoke to say that the situation is still fluid. Nobody can tell what will happen next, but it seems normalcy is returning on the economic front. That is what I know so far.
And very quickly, Mo, the country now has a new leader. The General Horta Ntam was sworn in as the transition president. What do we know of this soldier?
Well, one interesting fact is that General Ntam himself led the troops that went into the presidential palace yesterday to arrest the president. The president, President Mbalo, sent out a message via social media saying that he has been deposed, and mentioned specifically that the chief of army staff, General Ntam, who is now the president for the what they call the transitional period of 1 year, that he was the man in charge of the troops that came into the presidential palace, mind you, to arrest him. Therefore, well, little is known about him personally, except that he has been a career soldier, very dedicated. As my former colleague spoke in the first part of this program, the military authorities led by this gentleman himself announced before the elections that they had arrested a few soldiers who were plotting a coup against this government that they have overthrown. So a lot of questions around his conduct, and we'll wait to see whether this turns out to be what people are alleging to be a arranged coup to protect Mr. Embalo, or it's something else. That is what we know so far. Very little is known about the man.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Mosani Aliyu, our Sahel correspondent. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Moving on to other stories, President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa has described as regrettable the announcement by U.S. President Donald Trump that South Africa would not be invited to take part in next year's G20 summit in Florida. In a statement, the presidency said South Africa would continue to participate as a full and active and constructive member of the G20. Well, last weekend, South Africa hosted the 2025 summit, the first on African soil, which Washington boycotted despite being the incoming G20 president. South Africa also rejected the U.S. suggestion to hand over the presidency to an embassy official. Instead, the ceremony happened at Pretoria's Foreign Ministry building after the summit. Well, as a member of the bloc, South Africa does not need an invitation to a G20 event. For around 9 years, Bamenda in northwestern Cameroon has been struggling under the shadow of the devastating Anglophone crisis, also known as the Ambazonia War. In 2016 to 2017, Cameroonian authorities suppressed protests against an alleged cultural marginalization by the Francophone-dominated government. Well, since then, many are still trying to find their feet.
Despite the lack of security and economic instability, the people of Bamenda have found ways to support education and community life as they struggle with the consequences of the devastating Anglophone crisis. Teachers refuse to learn and die, offering improvised lessons for a generation growing up in crisis.
We are studying in a situation that we call it an emergency education. The children have to cover something to face a national exam with others, and they have to cover what other schools are covering in other regions where things are, say, normal. So we have to adopt some strategies to see that we are able to cope.
For fashion designer Indy Linus, his tailoring business continues amid curfews, lockdown, shortages, and other challenges.
I began working in Bamenda when there was no armed conflict, and my trade was thriving. But as the crisis developed, life became very difficult. We are barely surviving and maintaining the craft, unlike in the past when our services were in high demand. That is no longer the case today.
However, solidarity helps the younger generation find a purpose beyond survival. In safe corners of the city, they create spaces for hope, art, and innovation.
We envisage a lot for the Northwest region after the crisis. We envisage a region that is going to be digitally upright. Digitally upright is the use of technology in addressing basic community problems, the likes of artificial intelligence in addressing our community problems like poor waste management, like water shortages, like our education gaps, etc.
This comes amid an ongoing armed conflict between the Cameroon Armed Forces and Ambazonian militant groups in mostly English-speaking northwest and southwest regions. Thousands of people have been reportedly killed in Cameroon since the crisis erupted, while more than 3.3 million people will need humanitarian assistance in 2025, according to the United Nations.
As we end the program today, here's our fun fact about the continent. Did you know that Kenya is the homeland of many of the world's fastest marathon runners, with a remarkable number coming from the Kalenjin tribe? The success is often linked to high-altitude training environments, strong running traditions, and cultural encouragement from a young age. Many Kalenjin athletes have broken world records and dominated international long-distance competitions. Well, today, the country, Kenya, remains a global powerhouse in distance running, inspiring athletes worldwide. And that's the program for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.